On today's episode of Where the Ramp Ends, we have Dr. Patrick Schwartz, and man, was this a thrilling episode.
This is an amazing episode, and I want to encourage every parent to stop and listen to this full episode. Patrick has such good advice on inclusion in schools and just inclusion in the community overall.
I think that his what really touched me, not only on this episode, but throughout our time in Partners in Policymaking, is how personable Patrick is. And if you listen to the full episode, you will understand how truly impacted by the world of disability Dr. Patrick Schwartz is.
He really has been. The disability community is very fortunate to have him. And can we just do a shout out because he got interested in advocacy because of his exposure to somebody that had a disability as a child.
And I truly think that exposure sometimes is the key to having true, raw, authentic conversations. So let's get this episode started.
Let's go.
And I am so excited to have this episode today. We have Dr. Patrick Schwartz joining Where the Ramp Ends today. Dr. Patrick Schwartz, we are so excited to have you, my friend.
Thank you so much, Bryce, for that kind welcome.
Would you like to introduce yourself a little bit to our audience?
Yes, I am Patrick Shores. I do a variety of different things in the disability field. So I am a presenter. I am also an author. I also am a big advocate who works in many schools. I work with agencies, I work with conferences, I work with a variety of different groups. And the age range I work with is womb to tomb.
Love that. Can you tell us a little bit about your life outside of your professional life?
Oh, it's a great question. I definitely am very committed to what I do professionally and personally. I am very much a big fan of outdoors and nature and hiking and getting around, and very much so music and art and architecture. And it keeps me busy with my job as well. So those are all big likes.
Can you can you tell us kind of like what was your first exposure to the world of inclusion and kind of what made you decide that this was a place where you wanted to dip your toes fully in this immersive world?
I think the first introduction to the world of inclusion was a friend of mine who was my next door neighbor when was growing up, and his name was David. And David was fun. I lived a house away from the park, and we would play at the park. We would do things such as basketball and go on the swings and playground equipment. And he was a fun friend. Something that was interesting is even though we lived next door, David and I did not go to the same school. He went to a different school. He had the attribute of having Down syndrome. And there was something very compelling. David's parents were older, and because of circumstances that weren't so great, they passed away. And my friend David, who was my next door neighbor, ended up going into an institutional setting when I was quite young, and at an early age passed away in that institutional setting. And it very much troubled me, and I didn't think that was a quality of life, for my really good friend. And that started me into thinking of what can I do about this situation? How can I make things better for people? This was not acceptable to me as a life outcome for a friend of mine.
That's amazing.
That that really is like that's it kind of leaves me speechless because that's so into that that's so touching that it impacted your life that much to think about all the things that you've done and all the people that you've helped because of one person in your life that you saw that improvement needed to be made. That's amazing.
Thank you for that feedback.
That just shows me that children are more immersive than we give them credit to. Children respond to differences a whole lot better than people do. I think adults could learn more from children than we realize.
Yeah, when I work with schools, which is quite a bit, is an extensive time every week. Kids are never my issue. It's attitudes of adults, which I have definite challenges with sometimes that I need to work on. We take it a day by day, step by step process.
So this event happened in your life and you knew something needed to change. What was your first step to making that change?
It definitely troubled me, as I shared before. My first step is um, I started to look out for the underdog. So at school, if somebody was being bullied or made fun of, I would stand up for people. And I really didn't subscribe to any particular school group. So if you think that there are maybe people who are part of sports or particular clubs, things like that. I just was a person who definitely kind of got along with everybody. But if I saw something that seemed like injustice, I would stand up for it. And later on, it brought me to a journey in the university world too, in terms of taking this a bit further. I think with the David situation, it compelled me to be an advocate when I didn't even know what the word advocate mean as a young kid.
So, what led you to want to be a part of Partners in Policymaking? I know that we met in Partners in Policymaking, and I remember you just giving such amazing energy, and I'm like, I have to learn more from this man. So, what made you be interested in Partners in Policymaking and want to give back to this amazing community and their families?
I think something that preceded my work with partners in policymaking is I'm actually my own self advocate. So I have ADHD as an attribute. It was undiagnosed when I was in school. And so I went through the school years unsupported for that particular characteristic. I found ways to support myself. Certain grades didn't work as well as others, and certain educators didn't work as well as others. However, there were some really amazing educators. I actually got diagnosed as an adult because I always knew deep down inside that I had the particular issues and characteristics, but I went to an expert and got diagnosed as an adult. So, part of proceeding partners in policy making work was, I think, my own self advocacy as well as for others. The other one was through the university journey in terms of what I prepared for. So when I actually first went into university studies, the career that I was strongly thinking about was occupational therapy. I could not take OT courses that were the major courses until I was a junior, but I got to take an intro course and some things like that. Friends of mine told me there was a course that I could take that was called Introduction to People with Intellectual Disabilities, and that you did not have to take tests for the course. You actually worked in schools and other types of settings as part of your assessment or your grade for that course. And I said, that sounds good. I'm not a big fan of formal tests, and I think experiences in schools would be good for a person who would be an occupational therapy major. The interesting thing is I went through that course and the professor, his name is Lou Brown, and he was very compelling as an educator. And what happened is we had a supervisor for our experience in that course. At the end of that particular intro course, he called a handful of names up to the front, and I was one of the names. And he shared with the handful of students that he called up, he said, I would like you to be in my teacher training program. And I said to him, I said, well, I'm actually an OT major. And he said, when do you get to take those courses? I said, not until I'm a junior. And I was a freshman at the time. And he said, I would like to give you an independent study in the best school in Madison, Wisconsin. That's where I grew up, and that's where I took my courses for university studies. And what happened is he was trying to recruit people for his teacher training program from his intro course. I discovered that I absolutely loved the teaching and the education part of things, and that I could be a great advocate for students who had diverse support needs in schools or identifications or IEPs. And then after that independent study, which is kind of unheard of for a sophomore, I discovered I actually did want to go into his teacher training program. I think he knew a little bit more about myself than I did at the time, but it was a great match, and I ended up um, being one of his master's students and a doctoral student through him. And I actually ended up teaching his methods courses because he was also looking for people who were teachers in the school district, which I did get hired for a teaching job right away in Madison Public Schools. He would do things like do partnership grants with the Madison schools, and they were for great research. So he had a federal grant, a major federal grant that was to prove everybody can learn. He had another one that was to prove everybody can work. And he had another one that was to prove everybody can have social relationships. Sorry, that was a long answer, but that led me to experiences working with partners in policymaking and everything that I do as a professor and as a presenter and as an author. Sorry about the long-winded answer.
No,
No,
absolutely not. That sounds like this man really shaped who you are as a professional and as a person. That's incredible to have that.
that sounds like a remarkable opportunity, and kind of explains a lot of the remarkable work that you do, that's in your background. And just a
Yeah,
small
thank you for
tidbit,
that.
a little fun fact, Patrick, you might find interesting. I just got diagnosed last week for ADHD officially and started getting.
Welcome to the club.
Yes, like you, I've known for, well, not always, but I've known since my oldest was diagnosed, and, um, I talked to a doctor then, that was over 20 years ago. I talked to a doctor then, he's like, "Well, if you've been, living with it, just live with it," and finally getting treated. So, anyway, fun fact.
Yeah, I think you can trust your instincts sometimes with this particular situation. When I was little too, my parents took me to specialists, and they said a couple of things. They said, there's a pill we could give him or get him involved in everything. And my parents decided to get me involved in everything. So, as a single digit age young man, I was biking to the YMCA that was maybe a mile and a half away from where I lived on major streets, but they knew I had some pretty decent protective behaviors, and I think it worked well. I haven't ever taken any medication for it. And I actually have friends and colleagues that say, "Hey, maybe you should try it." And I said, I've went this far without it, and I think Patrick is just Patrick at this point. By the way, he passed away, a couple of years ago, and he actually fulfilled another role in my life. I think he was also a father figure for me because I lost my dad when I was a teenager, and I think he was such a great mentor and such a leader, and I think he fulfilled a father figure role as well as, definitely a really wonderful model in the field with how I should proceed and work as, advocate for people with disabilities.
Well, that's amazing. I'm so thankful that you had people in your life to point you in that direction because you have definitely contributed a lot to the community. Do you want to talk about like what you feel is real meaningful inclusion in the classroom, what that looks like?
First of all, my definition of inclusion is everybody belongs everywhere with everyone else in their schools and their community. And it seems like a fairly simple definition, but when you think of the way that services have come forward for people with disabilities, there are lots of assessments. And I think sometimes these assessments, when they are not as person centered as they should be, are kind of like creating a situation between haves and have nots. And so people have to, earn inclusion, belonging everywhere with everyone else. I think it should be a given. And all of the information and research exists to make it a reality. So if you think of the support system for inclusion, the first one is differentiation, and that's making learning work for everybody. So we think about when we're considering learners, we think about um, essential, we think about expected, and we think about enrichment learning targets. And everybody is an individual. So think about there's certain subjects we like, certain educators we like, certain students in certain classes we like. Some of us are morning people, some of us are afternoon people. And if you think about it in terms of how we present ourselves and what we are able to learn is different for different classes and times of day if you're in a school. So it's about creating a support system looking at essential, expected, and enrichment learning targets or supports for people. The next support system is universal design for learning. And this is my very favorite. So it's how we create access for people. And there's three areas. One is how we represent curriculum, one is how we engage students and make things interesting. And then also the other area is thinking about creating that entire support system in terms of creating assessments that work for everybody. So, not the same thing works for everybody. And then the very last support in the system would be individual accommodations. These are individual supports, and I like to see them specified on a person's IEP or individual education plan. So, if we can think about how we make learning work for everybody, differentiation, make it accessible with universal design for learning, and create that individual support system with accommodations, I think we have a personalized plan to make things work, to make inclusion a reality. By the way, everything is out there to make these things happen in schools. I'm a contributor to this, but there are many, many, many researchers and authors who have brought forward this information and very usable material to make this happen in schools. What is the barrier or what is the roadblock? I think it's fear. I think people are scared because I think there are so many people that are in the community and in schools that have never experienced true inclusion. They maybe didn't grow up alongside and with individuals with disabilities in their own education or their own classes and educational settings. And this goes for both um, individuals that are maybe stakeholders. So this could be administrators, it could be teachers or educators, it could be related service individuals. So a variety of people may have not had true experiences with inclusion. And I think fear and attitudes get in the way. I'm in schools every single day to try to make it a reality. And it's super important. And we need more people doing this. That's why I'm a big fan of partners in policy making and what both of you went through, Summer and Bryce, with these experiences, because you become advocates to change these outdated attitudes and systems and to promote better practice and learning. So that's super important.
Yeah, I'll say one thing I hear a lot of parents, not a whole lot, but I hear parents say, we tried my child putting my child in the mainstream classroom and they're just a distraction and I don't want to be that parent. Um And when I started Partners in Policy Making, I kind of expected, well, my daughter's going to be in this bedroom probably the majority of the time. By the time Partners in Policy Making was over, after hearing you and Guy Caruso and Al Condalucci speak, I was like, no, she needs to be in that mainstream classroom. And she's in kindergarten and she has Down syndrome and she's in the mainstream classroom, 85-90% of the time, um, other than she's pulled out for one-on-one work. So, but what would you say to those parents that say, "Well, I don't want my child to be a distraction, I don't wanna cause waves." What would you say to them? Are there some resources that you can point them to?
It's a great question. So first of all, no kid should be a distraction. I think if you're looking at schools, we have neighborhood schools, we have communities. Every kid counts, and it's an educator's job to make learning work for everybody. I definitely understand that fear because when parents have a son or daughter that has an identification or a disability, IEP, anything with that within that realm, that child does not come with a recipe book. When you think about families, that child lands on their doorstep and they're doing the best they can to support and learn and to create the best life or quality of life for their son or daughter. With people in schools, it's different because they have went through training, they have went through methods classes, they have went through experiences to make learning work for students. In many cases, that training maybe needs to be updated or things need to be brushed up on when it comes to inclusion. A kid should never be thought of as a distraction. A kid should be thought of as a member of the school, a member of the community, and an asset to any classroom that they're in. Some kids need a support system. Actually, I believe everybody needs a support system somewhere. So, thinking about rather than a distraction, if I'm a parent, what is everything I can do together with my son or daughter's team to make learning work and to give the best supports also to the educators on our team to make that a reality, to do everything I can in my power to help the teen get to know my son or daughter. So I think that is also the job of the kid or self advocate, the student, and the family to do everything they can to know what works and what doesn't work, to share that with the team and to make sure we are creating a support system to engender success. So I think it comes from every member of the team, but rather than coming from the mindset, my kid is a distraction, is a different mindset, I think, is in order. My kid is a member. How do I best advocate to make that membership successful? Did that answer your question?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And,
Thanks
would
for
you be
asking.
a yeah, would you be able to give an example? You don't have to use, names, but maybe you have somebody in mind that it was they received a simple support or accommodation that allowed them to be in the classroom. Any does
Success stories.
do you have any success stories that you have in mind?
There's so many. My first book, From Disability to Possibility, is an example of a lot of different success stories and some stories that maybe aren't so great, uh, that actually created some ahas for me in terms of what we need to do to support kids. Um, there are countless stories that I can share, but if I'm thinking of one that has to do with a parent, I'm considering uh, particular parents. So I'm changing names, even though I think I could actually use the names because I'm very close with this particular family and self advocate. The student is Libby, and the parent is Susie. So Libby is a student. That actually is really fun. She has a rigorous sense of humor, has a great artistic ability, and she has entered her artwork into competitions and has fared very well. And she happens to also have cerebral palsy as an attribute and uses assistive technology for her communication. I think, in the beginning, um, I think both Libby and her mom, Susie, were learning how to work with an inclusive, type of situation and experience. It's something that both Libby and Susie definitely believed in. And this was something that they advocated for. And then when it was granted, it was how do you work with the team to make things successful? I think one of the big moments that was an epiphany, that was a game changer for the team, was all of a sudden one day is when Libby started using her assistive technology in terms of making a response. And I think one thing that it brought forward for the entire team is we have a lot of possibilities we can think of, because I think prior to that is the team was trying to find the best ways to create positive participation, and all of a sudden it clicks, it happens, and we're thinking of possibilities. So, one of my favorite sayings is don't quit 5 minutes before the miracle happens. And this was a team that persevered. And all of a sudden, is we have some new things we can work with. So, it was a big aha moment for this team. And I think it brought them into new territory for how do we best support this really cool student and make effective learning happen for her.
Oh, that's amazing.
What would you say to someone that is maybe afraid of challenging a school system or an administrative team or a team that might not, be as familiar with somebody with, special, accommodation needs?
I think in terms of considering that is, first of all, be familiar with what you want when it's inclusion. So, for example, when I present for partners in policy making, there are materials that I share with every participant that is involved with that. I will share with people when there are things I think people should use for their school meetings to advocate for their son or daughter. So I think, first of all, I want people before thinking about challenging the school system is think about how do I collaborate with them effectively and bring in things that support what I'm seeking for my son or daughter. I will share that there are things that I actually recommend to family members and self advocates when I'm presenting for partners that may be unique things for schools so that they actually may be educating their school system about inclusive education best practice. So, for example, there is one handout that is about co teaching and different co teaching models. And that is a practice that I'm finding is taking place in schools that brings together a general education teacher and a special educator. Typically, it's that formation that teach together in a general education inclusion model together with students who are identified and not identified in the same classroom. So I'd encourage families when they're advocating for their son or daughter or self advocates or both, to bring in that information, to be informed, and to put on that collaboration hat. Sometimes we may get to the point where we might be challenging something, but go in with information and research and best practice that support what you are looking for. Also, a bottom line question I found that I sometimes say to parents or family members that they might ask a team, hey, this is research, this is best practice. These are things that I've learned from others. Can you live with us trying this out and taking a step with this? Kind of a bottom line question is, can you live with this? And it shows that you want to collaborate and take steps with people. So those are some things that I discovered that can be helpful with taking next steps and working with a team who may not be at the same place with parental knowledge of what a family member is looking for.
What does research show about the benefits of inclusion for children with disabilities? But not just for the children with disabilities, but for typical kids. What does that inclusion, that
There is a
benefit?
lot of research out there, and I'm in the midst of research actually right now. This last school year, I have been working with the largest high school district in Illinois, which is five major high schools, and it's on co-teaching. And we have done some research. Here's some benefits of general inclusion. So if you're thinking about students who have an identification or an IEP, first of all, if team members do it right, so I'm recommending, first of all, in terms of doing it right, the most up to date professional development to learn what we've been talking about. So we've been talking about differentiation, universal design, individual accommodations. So individuals who are the professionals learn how to bring that forward correctly and effectively, in addition to co teaching, because I am actually encountering many, many, many schools who are bringing this forward. So, most schools that I encounter these days have co teaching models taking place. In terms of benefits, we're seeing extensive benefits with students who have identifications or disabilities that they can learn more. understand more and assess better when this is being brought forward correctly um, in schools. By the way, I do want to say something too that I think is something that should be said side by side to this. There are no research studies that show that separate is better. So self-contained, separate situations where students are not together with everyone belonging everywhere. And so I don't want to make anybody feel bad by their present situation because there are a variety of different situations that parents are encountering with their own sons and daughters in situations. But just remember, is using information that is being learned today, is there a step that people can take with their own educational team to advocate and take a new step and actually elevate what is being done because it's never too early, it's never too late to start. Other benefits also for individuals with disabilities are that students are learning from the educational models that are present in a general setting. So they have more opportunities to have better models. Now, I'm not saying that every kid in the world in a general setting is a great model, but if you're everywhere with everyone else, encountering a greater array of students, you have a greater increased chance of experiencing models throughout the day in a variety of different situations. What I mean by that, it can be in a variety of classrooms, it can be in general settings like the hallways, it can be in the libraries, it can be also in the cafeteria, it can be on the playground, it can be in the general gym. So if you think about all the general settings that are part of inclusion, you have a greater chance of encountering um, models and a greater array of models. So you are again functioning with everyone, everywhere, with everyone else. And I think that's important. Benefits for students without disabilities actually, what has been shown is that kids are more responsive, they're more sensitive to disability, they are more caring, and they actually become better in ways that are, I think, supportive for a wider array of friendships and also as just being good citizens in their school overall. They learn more about diversity. And isn't that important? Is school just about academics? Or should we also learn how to be really good, I would say, friends for a wide array of different individuals? And I think that's just as important as the curriculum that we learn just to be good citizens as well. I don't think you can do that if you're not experiencing everyone. Is I think that something is missing out of an education for a student without a disability if they are not alongside and going to classes with everyone everywhere. And so, really, what it's about is everybody getting to know everyone else in their own school and their own general community. I hope that answers that question. It's a big question, but look it up. Just do general web um, searches, and you will find some really great research studies about the benefits of inclusion. And I think that should be very heartening for people.
We actually had one of our classmates in Partners in Policy Making, a young man named Jeremy, whose mother went through Partners in Policy Making um, originally, and she, I think, I believe she was really inspired by you to have Jeremy in the mainstream classroom as much as possible, and then he went through Partners in Policymaking with Bryce and I later, and his mom tells the story about, I believe, 20 of his classmates have gone into either special education or into, a career in the disability community because Jeremy inspired them, and so that's incredible to me. Like, that backs up what you're saying, that, that inclusion just really benefits everybody, not just those students that have a disability.
Absolutely. Isn't that a wonderful story? And thank you for sharing that, Summer. I have known Trina, who is Jeremy's mom, and Jeremy for many, many years. And I know they're okay that I share their names because Trina and Jeremy are active on social media. And I think they've told their story really well. And I get to reunite with them every year. And I've known Jeremy ever since he's been a little boy. And Trina, since she was first looking for supports and answers for the best way to educate Jeremy. And they've come so far. They're amazing advocates. Trina's extensive work with the autism community is just very wonderful. And Jeremy is carrying on the same work as well. And as you shared somebody, you can see the effect this has had on people that
Yes.
Jeremy has went to school with as well as the general community. They have been outstanding advocates. This is exactly what we want to see as a result of partners in policy making is to go out and change the world and make a difference. And both of them are great examples of this. So thank you for bringing that forward.
Yes. We actually are planning on we've been in touch with Trina about being a guest as well on this podcast because,
Yes.
she's a warrior, and I know she has a
Yes.
lot of wisdom that I wanna sit down and have a conversation with her, and I know I wanna share that conversation with the world. So,
We do a selfie together every year, and, I bet you I've got 15 selfies with Trina, so we have known each other for a long time. Sorry to interrupt, Summer. You see
no,
the
I
age
was just
difference,
gonna
but
say that just goes that just goes to show how big of an impact you've had. Just amazing.
You
yeah,
know, shout out
yes.
to shout out to Jen Randall for and Dr. Brad Mays for, you know, getting people in partners in policy making that are so knowledgeable and willing to give back. I know, Summer, we talk about Jen at least once in the episode.
Yes.
So, shout out to Jen and Brad for their extensive work and finding people that want to be a part of the team. As Patrick says, being everywhere, everywhere, and they want to be everywhere. They want people to have a voice, and they get people in partners in policy making and share their stories. And that's why partners in policy making is so impactful, is because we really become a family.
Yes.
True, and Bryce, like you and Summer, I'm thinking of Brad and Jen and people like that from Oklahoma partners, and they're very good, like both of you are, at hunting me down. I'm booked for next year because they were worried I would get too booked up. So I'm booked for October. So I'll be in Oklahoma in October to do
We
this
would
once
love to
again.
see you.
We might just sneak into that class.
Please do it. That would be wonderful. I would love it.
Yes. Patrick, what do you think needs to change at the policy level for things to improve?
I think very much like what we're talking about is I think something that partners members are doing across the country is they are sharing information, they are creating learning opportunities and understanding for policymakers. And I think that is the first step is knowledge is power, and let's compel our policymakers to do the right thing. And I think with what partners members are learning, they are certainly learning the right thing and are advocating for social justice, inclusion, human rights, and best practices for supporting people with disabilities. And thinking about partners in policymaking, this is a national effort. So it's another thing besides school districts that keeps me very busy. By the way, let's see, what is today? Today is Tuesday. So on Friday, I'm headed to Louisiana to do Louisiana partners. And so it keeps me very busy being in schools and with partners. So the people that I'm going to on Friday will be advocating with legislators as well. And that is everything to me. That's why this is so important. And I think knowledge, power, advocacy, the power part is making best practice so powerful that it's compelling to our policymakers to advocate the same way we're advocating for best practices for people with disabilities. I've seen a lot of wonderful things happen because partners in policymaking members have went and advocated. So that is the most important thing. I think I'm together doing the same thing. So every single week and um, pretty much every single day, I'm advocating in so many different ways. And I think this information getting to policymakers is everything because it has an effect on schools, it has an effect on agencies, and mostly it has an effect on students, self advocates, and families. And that's the most important thing.
We want to thank Dr. Patrick Schwartz for his time and expertise on advocacy, and we want to thank him for being so personable with his journey.
These conversations are so important, and I know that this conversation will help so many families.
And I want to say thank you to Oklahoma Partners in Policymaking for allowing him to be such a champion of advocacy and light.
Thanks again, Patrick, for joining us today. And Bryce, you can sign us off.
For Where the Ramp Ends. Till next time, I'm Bryce,
And I'm Summer.
and this is Where the Ramp Ends and Where Your Journey Begins. Till next time, bye bye.